The views and opinions of this broadcast do not reflect the views and opinions of Armed Media, New Productions and its affiliates. Enjoy the show.
Teflon Pan Man. I'm the Teflon Pan Man. Ain't nothing gonna stick on me.
Hey everyone, and welcome to All You Can Eat. It's the podcast about deliciousness. I'm your host, Rob Rosenthal. Welcome to the show. It's number 71, episode 71, and the very first one of the year 2020. My goodness, did that arrive quickly. Whoa, that was a very fast decade. This is, it's not the first Wednesday of 2020, is it? It's the second, but we didn't actually do a show on January 1, which was New Year's Day. But here we are now. And as I like to do, ladies and gentlemen, I am coming to you live from New York City, New York, where it is most officially now winter. Normally when I get on and I tell people how lovely it is here in New York City, it's because it is. It's, comfortable. The weather is good. The place is safe. People are coming to visit. Today is one of those days when you get those, I'm set up for some kind of text messaging thing and they come in going, winter weather advisory, There's no winter weather advisory. I mean, that is noticeable to a normal human. I mean, it's cold, but it's not terrible. It's windy, but it's not as bad as wind can be. What are they calling them? Squalls? I don't know. They have now funny names. People panic about the weather. I do not panic about the weather. Nothing you can do about it other than make the most of it. And what does that mean, making the most of it? Well, in my case, that means one of two things, generally speaking. To be somewhere else that's better to be, by which I mean, travel and vacation and this kind of thing, if you can. When I'm here, another way to deal with kind of the outside forces is to cook your way through them here on the inside. And so that brings me to tonight's episode, as I said, episode 71 of All You Can Eat, where we generally talk about things that are related to food and cooking and eating and travel, and certainly travel, and anything else that seems to be kind of like, delicious. And there are so many things in life that can be delicious, whether it's what you eat or where you go or the people that you hang out with. And that is a little bit of an introduction to tonight, which is somewhat of a potpourri type of show in the sense that we're going to talk a little bit about travel, because I am just back from a very fabulous place that I want to tell you about, Costa Rica. Super lovely country. Super lovely little country. And I want to tell you that I am just back, and when I say just back, I mean within hours, of a television show taping. I was in the audience for this one. It was the Dr. Oz show that I was at, I would say 3 hours ago. I'll tell you a little bit about that. And then on the subject of delicious eating, I got some recipes to speak with you about as well. Some of the delicious eating that is possible. And I am a huge proponent of DIY, do it yourself. Every time I tag an Instagram post of something that I have made, and I make a lot of stuff, it gets tagged, hashtag homemade, home style, home cooking, hashtag DIY, because I'm big on doing it yourself. Now, where shall we start this evening? I think we're going to go start with the Dr. Oz, because I'm working in reverse order. I was literally at that show 3.5 hours ago now. It came up out of the blue. A friend of mine sent me an email and said, hey, I have a ticket to go to be in the audience of the Dr. Oz show. It tapes in New York City. It's going to be on Wednesday afternoon. Do you want to go? By the way, Jamie Oliver will be a guest. And I've been to live show tapings before. What was the last one that I went to? I mean, I don't remember offhand. I've been to live show tapings before, and they can be interesting and fun. And Jamie Oliver, and to be honest with you, it's like, so I said, yeah, I looked at the calendar, I said I can do it. I thought it'd be something that would be worth going to. And at minimum, I could use it to tell people tonight on this very podcast, what's going down. So here's basically what it boils down to. They shoot the Dr. Oz show in a studio in New York City on the West Side. And it was kind of cold and windy, so you try to get there at the last minute, so you're not standing outside in the cold and the brutal wind. But they did a pretty good job of getting people in. I don't think I was outside for more than 15 minutes. But I will say that between the time that I arrived and the time that I left was a 3-hour span. So you're definitely going to dedicate 3 hours to it. That reminds me that the last show I did go to was to see the Stephen Colbert show. Also, again, a 3 or 4 hour thing. You have to have a ticket. You have to go through security. It's a whole rigmarole. And is it worth it? Well, yeah, you're not paying for the ticket. It's worth it. It's certainly good for the experience. Is it interesting? I suppose that depends on your point of view, your perspective, and certainly a lot on your feelings about the host and the guests. And I love Colbert, so that experience was fabulous. I don't count myself among the fans of Dr. Oz. I don't have anything against the guy, but I wouldn't have necessarily chosen to have gone on my own. But, my friend Robin checked in. She said, hey, I can't go. I'm going to be at this unfortunate occasion. Do you want to go? Jamie Oliver. I heard Jamie Oliver, and I said, you know what? The calendar is good. I'm going to check it out. And I went down, and, eventually an hour after you arrive, you're seated in the studio. There's a guy there who is, in every one of these cases, whether you're going to see Jimmy Kimmel, who I've seen, whether you go to see Colbert, whether you go to see Dr. Oz, there's a guy there who you might call kind of a host or an MC, the guy who generally has a comedy background, whose job is to get the audience all psyched up, because why? The program is going to be running live, and they want there to be the sound of an excited audience, and so they try to get you all riled up and all that kind of stuff. And then eventually, the good doctor shows up. And so, hi, how you doing? And everybody, and hello, and clap your hands, and when we do this, and then, there's a lot of sitting around and waiting, and eventually they start shooting segments. Not even in this case an entire show start to finish, but literally, they're going to shoot 9 food segments in total. Each segment looks like it's going to run about 3 minutes, and then they'll edit it into, various shows that they'll run over the next however. In other words, in fact, the first couple of segments were related to the Super Bowl. There was no Jamie Oliver to speak of, but there was a lady chef. I wish I could tell you what her name was. I don't know. And then there was another, and then there was Gail Simmons, who I know personally and well. In fact, and I like Gail Simmons. I think she's terrific. She is one of the hosts. She's one of the hosts on the Bravo Top Chef, and has been on this very podcast not once but twice. So if you're a fan of Gail and you want to hear my chat with her, it's on here twice on All You Can Eat, which you can discover either on iHeartRadio. You go into iHeart Podcasts and you search for All You Can Eat or Rob Rosenthal, and if you scan that list, eventually you'll see, among other notable people, Jean-Georges Vangeristen and cookbook authors and chefs and all that kind of stuff. I have a couple of episodes there with Gail. And you can also find it on Spotify. You can look for All You Can Eat on Spotify. But anyway, there's Gail, which I didn't know that she would be there. And so they're doing some Super Bowl segments. What did they do? They did like a Cuban sandwich pin roll. They made that. What else did they make? Oh, Gail did like chicken and waffle bites, which certainly looked tasty. And of course, everything is kind of Dr. Oz'd up, meaning that they tried to incorporate some component of health to make dishes less kind of, fattening and disgusting than they might be otherwise. And so there's 3 segments on that. Then they do another 3 segments on food that you can make out of a box. Now, I'm going to be blunt about this, as I am. One of the things that you'll discover about me is that I'm a big believer in the brutal truth. It's not always politically correct. It's not always nice, but it saves time because it gets to the facts of the matter more quickly. I was kind of surprised to see on the Dr. Oz show food that was made out of a box. I'm not saying that it's inherently bad, but most experts these days, and especially people like Dr. Oz, who are promoting kind of good eating and well-being, are pushing a purchase of fresh food. You know, the kind of food in the supermarket that you get in the fruit and the vegetable and the produce section, and not the stuff that comes from the middle of the store that is all, you know, in boxes and processed. And nonetheless, they did the segment. I want to say her name was Chef Jamaica. I want to say I'm just guessing here, but it was close to that. Made something with maybe some kind of crab cakes that she made with a stuffing box mix. Gail did something with those what do you call those, like mashed potatoes that come in a box? And she was making gnocchi out of it, which frankly looked good. And then after that, you're already there now for a couple of hours, maybe more. Finally, guess who comes into the room? Jamie Oliver. And Jamie Oliver, it's exciting to see Jamie because, in my estimation, as a guy who has been watching food television since before most of you were born, Jamie Oliver's the real deal, and not just because of his television exposure. I think he's great in television. Not just because of his 7 or 8 million people that follow him on, on an Instagram or whatever. But I learned today he's written 21 cookbooks. Now, I wrote one. Short Order Dad, One Guy's Guide to Making Food Fun and Hassle-Free. You can get it on Amazon. And one is an endeavor. 21 is very impressive, even though he has a team of people doing a lot of the work for him. But personable, smart, fun. He was actually on Colbert last night. So that's like a segment that you can even, I guess, go to, YouTube and check out Colbert and watch. Anyway, Jamie is there and he's promoting essentially his new book, which I believe, what do they call his book? The Ultimate Veg. So Jamie's book is Ultimate Veg. Now, Ultimate Veg makes sense to me on the Dr. Oz show, right? Because this is a guy who's got a book with 150 recipes that are all based on vegetables. There's no meat in the thing. There's no fish in the thing. And I totally get it because we're coming off a year when everything was about vegetables. Everything. Everywhere you look, this is what people are talking about, and I totally get it. And so Jamie is smart enough to know that you put out a book, he puts out a book, and that's focused on making vegetables fabulous. So I think this is smart. I can't recommend or not recommend it. I haven't seen it, but I can tell you that I've seen him cook some of the stuff. And, if you're into vegetables and you're into Jamie, you pick up this book, Ultimate Veg, because, this guy knows. Although I don't want to kill book sales for anybody, but I'm sure a bunch of those recipes are available, online. Anyway, 3 hours spent. You have to be patient in the world of any kind of television programming because you spend a lot of time, as much time sitting and waiting as you do, actually watching the taping. And so that was this afternoon's activity. And one of the things that I will use from that experience to tell you about, I was reminded of when they were making their little Cuban pinwheels for the Super Bowl. So before I even tell you about that, I will tell you that when it comes to the Super Bowl, I would say for the last 15 years, I post year in, year out, my recipe for pigs in blankets. And I do that because people expect it now. People have asked me for it. Oh, what's the pigs in blankets thing again? So the pigs in blankets thing is fantastic in the sense that it requires only 2 ingredients of you. Like literally, you could make pigs in blankets with 2 ingredients. And for those who know me, or I will tell those who don't, my goal in cooking is to, as I say, I have a 6-word formula: most taste, fewest ingredients, least effort. So a 2-ingredient meal for me is fantastic. And pigs in blanket, I've said before, but I'll say again, it's one of the great things in the world. I mean, if you go to like any type of a wedding or occasion, and they're serving all different kinds of fancy hors d'oeuvres. I don't care if it's kind of like duck quesadillas or lobster rolls or mini sliders. Of course, are very lovely, or little baby lamb chops or shrimp. People go bananas about shrimp. I totally get this. I will literally knock over a bride to get to the pigs in blankets. There is just something about the little frankfurter wrapped in a little pastry dough, dipped in some nice yellow mustard, that is making me salivate, actually, as I am telling you this tale. And so for me, each and every Super Bowl, right before the Super Bowl, I post up a video of how to make pigs in blankets. I would tell you now, what's the easiest way for you to find it? I suppose if you went online and you go YouTube, I don't know, Rob Rosenthal, pigs in blankets, I think it's up there somewhere. If not, get in touch with me and I'll put it back out into the world. I always do the pigs in blankets, and you need only two things. You need the pigs, you need the blankets. You could use hot dogs. I don't. I use kielbasa, which I buy at the Costco. For those of you who know me, it's because I am the Costco hoe. I try to spend one day every week of my life at the Costco picking up something, and we'll get to that later. And the other thing that you need to make your pigs in blankets, aside from the pig product, is the wrapping, and for that I use that that frozen Pillsbury dough, and you just essentially maybe grill off the the kielbasa a little bit, which I think already comes cooked anyway. But like even if you had hot dogs, I mean hot dogs are also generally cooked, but I like to you want to get them a little grilly, you want to get a little grill marks on the thing, cool them down a bit, wrap them inside the pastry dough, and then stick them in the oven and bake them until they're golden brown. It's usually, 15, 20 minutes at 350, whatever it is, whatever the package instructions say. Chop them into bite-sized pieces. Serve them with your Gulden, serve them with Dijon, serve them with honey mustard, and it's a win. And so it's great for the Super Bowl. That's a long way around the fact that they were making a Cuban pinwheel, and so they were using like Pillsbury dough. They put ham and cheese on it, and they put some pickles on it, and they put some mustard on it, because two of the key ingredients on the Cuban sandwich are mustard and pickles. What they neglected to put on their little pinwheel is what is to me the kind of primary ingredient on the Cuban sandwich, which is the roast pork. I mentioned this to you in the context of the Cuban sandwich being, for me, one of the top 10 sandwiches in the world. I did not intend to list the top 10 sandwiches in the world, but I will tell you this. Let's just off the top of my head, I'm going around the country. If I were, you're up in the Northeast, you could have a lobster roll. If you're in the New York area, you're not going to argue with a pastrami sandwich. There's nothing wrong. We have a great bacon. We call it egg and cheeser. It's like it could be egg and cheese on a roll. Sometimes they add bacon. I'll throw in, I don't know if it's in the top 10, but a well-made BLT, the bacon, lettuce, and tomato sandwich is good. You go to New Orleans, you're having a muffaletta or a po' boy. That's 5 right there. I love, and I'm going out west now maybe because I need something Vietnamese. I love the banh mi. That's just an awesome sandwich. That's number 6. You're down in Miami, ladies and gentlemen, the Cuban sandwich. The Cuban sandwich, roast pork, ham, cheese, mustard, pickle, on pressed bread. It's a beautiful, beautiful sandwich. And then some of the other sandwiches come from other parts of the world, or actually even here. I mean, who's going to argue with like a chicken or a veal parmesan hero? I mean, so we can get into, what are the greatest sandwiches, what aren't, and all that kind of thing. I mentioned this because they made the pinwheel thing. And it reminds me that on the way back from Costa Rica, this is like, what is it? Today's the 8th. So let's say it's 10 days ago. I make a stop at the Miami airport. Now remember, ladies and gentlemen, that if you're going to get a Cuban sandwich in the United States of America, there's no better place to get it than in Miami, Florida, where you have a huge population of Cubans. I oftentimes give a what you would call kind of a class or a lecture or a presentation here at the 92nd Street Y, an institution in New York City. The subject, one of the subjects that I speak about is called culinary tourism. One of the things that I tell people is to understand the demography, the ethnicity, the ethnic composition of the places that they're going in the world. So, for example, if you're going to Lima, Peru, it doesn't hurt to know that there's a large Japanese population because it influences the cooking. If you're going to Brazil, as an example, it's good to know that there's a giant Lebanese population. If you go to the city of Paris, it's nice to know that there is a district called the Marais where there's a Jewish population. And so there are foods that are represented and representative in those parts of the world that are certainly worth eating. So you go to Miami, and it's a good place to have Cuban food. Very famous restaurant down on, down in Miami area, Calle Ocho, that area. Versailles, it's called. Where you're going to go in, you're going to have rice and beans and shredded beef and beer, and it's just lovely. But when I showed up 2 weeks ago yesterday at the airport in Miami, I got there we pulled in kind of late. It was like 7 at night, and so we kind of missed a meal somewhere along the way. I was hungry. Now, I know from past experience that if you go to the Miami airport, there are two Cuban operations. One is called, I think it's called La Carreta. The other one, I think it's called Versailles, because I think it's a branch of that restaurant that I just mentioned in Miami. And you can get Cuban food there. I actually go there for the coffee. I mean, Cuban coffee is jet fuel. I just love it. It's served in these tiny, tiny little to-go cups, but they end up giving you I order one. I have one Cuban, please. They go sugar, no sugar. I go sure, sugar. And they give it to you. They give you this one kind of to-go cup with like 10 little shot cups, like as if it were going to be for 10 people. No, it's for me. And they'll serve with it, pasteles, like little, like pastries, sometimes stuffed with meat that are just yummy. I'm always happy, when I know that I have like a layover or an entrance or an exit from Miami Airport, because I'm just happy having Cuban coffee. But 2 weeks ago, I show up there and I get into a conversation with a woman who's working at like one of those, I could see, there's a woman who is working at one of those, foreign exchange booths. So it has nothing to do with food, which she does. But she's sitting there alone, and I actually said to her, do you eat here? And she said, yeah, sure, in the terminal, yeah. I said, where would you go for Cuban? And she said, well, you may want to go down to Carreta or Versailles, which I kind of knew about. But I said, hey, look, 3 doors down from where you are is this place called Estefan, or like Little Estefan Kitchen, or whatever it's called. Have you been there? She goes, no. Okay. Well, I pop over to the Estefan Kitchen, and I can't help but noticing two things. One is that there's an old Cuban woman in the kitchen. I take that as a good sign. I take that as a good sign because there's somebody waiting, and I see that she's actually making the food. Like, that makes a difference, right? I see somebody's making the food, not that it's been sitting, around. And I see and they have a full bar, even though there's like 4 bar seats, but that's it. This is not like a big operation. This is like literally like a branch or a satellite of something. So I say to the guy who's working there, there's one guy out front, and I go, how's the Cuban sandwich? He goes, it's real good. I go, real good? Yeah. I said, you know what? Give me a Cuban sandwich. I figure, what I got to lose? I mean, so I order the Cuban, and while I'm waiting for the Cuban to be made, there's a sign out front that says, Estefan voted Miami's best, mojito. Well, what a happy coincidence this is, because I got 40 minutes to kill before the flight. So I say, hey, to this guy, mix me up a mojito. Well, I'll tell you something, man. That mojito was one of the best I ever had, right? So what makes a good mojito? It's basically, he's gonna take a good lime, and he's gonna, ground it. What do they call that? With the muddle. Yeah, he's gonna muddle a lime, and he's gonna muddle and he's gonna put in some fresh mint. Fresh. Okay, when it comes to cocktails, stuff has to be fresh, people. Fresh lime, fresh mint, and then he puts in the sugar syrup, right? There's a shot of that, and then he puts in a good hit of rum and a whole bunch of ice, and I'm sipping on this thing, and I'm thinking, I got no problem waiting for the sandwich because this is a fine, fine cocktail. And then the sandwich comes, the Cuban sandwich. I will remind you that you are looking at what you would call French or Italian bread that has been smeared with some nice quality mustard, some good pickles, a sheet of ham, some Swiss, and some roast pork. And then pressed, right? So the bread is that combination of toasty on the exterior, some chewiness, some softness on the inside with that combination of flavors. I took one bite into this thing and I found myself not in Miami, but in heaven. God, that was good. I did everything I could to save the second half of the sandwich for the plane ride. In fact, I ate the whole first, finished the mojito, ordered a second mojito, and took the second mojito and the second half of the sandwich over to the plane. The plane took off, and I thought I should wait until beverage service to have the second half of my Cuban. But I was peckish at that point, and the second half went down maybe even more easily than the first. Like I didn't even need liquid. Like, you imagine having a sandwich and you don't even need like a hit of liquid? I mean, I cannot wait to get back to the Miami airport. That's how good it was. Now, here's the funny part, right? When I knew I was coming on for the program tonight, I do a little Google search. What do I search for? Like, I remembered Estefan, I remembered Miami Airport, and I look it up, and I'm directed to the Estefan kitchen, which it turns out is the restaurant operation run by Gloria Estefan and her husband. I mean, they have restaurants in Miami that are specializing in Cuban food, and this was like a little branch office over at the airport. All I can tell you is I will be back at the Miami airport in 2.5 to 3 weeks. I will be looking. I hope that I am in the same terminal. There's like 4 terminals there because I want to get my hands on. That Cuban sandwich. That was really, really good. Bless you people. I'll tell you what, by the way, I ain't making no pinwheels. I'll do some pigs in blankets when it comes to the Super Bowl with the 2 ingredients. Love that. I'm big on chicken wings. You can buy them by the gross over at the Costco. They do it 2 ways. They do party wings. I believe they're organic and they're like smaller because they broke them in half. I believe they do regular old chicken wings that are just, they're bigger. You know, they didn't kind of cut them in half for you. Either way, chicken wings, one of the easiest things in the world to make. And great for a party because who doesn't like them? You don't have to fry these things. You know, they have enough fat on the skin there so that all you have to do is flavor them. Stick them in a hot oven. Flavor them, stick them in a hot oven. 20, 25 minutes later, turn them over so they're crispy on both sides. What are you going to flavor them with, my friends? Well, depends. You like a smoky flavor? You could use some of that Spanish paprika they call pimentón. You could use a chipotle, dry chipotle powder on your wings. That'll give you smoky. Make sure you either one of those is really good. If you want to go kind of buffalo style, you're going to need to incorporate some of the hot sauce, the Frank's hot sauce. If you're going to use a Frank's hot sauce, you're going to minimize the salt that you need on the wings because Frank's comes with its own dose of salt. And, my strategy is I put them in super high heat. I wait until the smoke comes out. Maybe I'll turn down the heat. The smoke alarm goes on. I turn it down a little further. You can look at wings and know that they're ready because they're nice and crispy. If you want to give your wings a different dimension, right, you can spice them up like I said. And you don't have to. If you don't like spicy, by the way, hit them up with whatever your favorite seasoning is. Or, just, salt and pepper. Oregano is good. Italian seasoning is good. Any flavoring kind of profile that you like, you can flavor them up, throw them in the oven. And if you want to, like I said, if you want to give them a buffalo thing, you're going to use Frank's hot sauce, also available in huge quantities at Costco. They should really, I know that they don't pay anybody to do, advertising for them. They don't need it, but I guess I'm happy to do it for nothing. Hang on, I'm going to get a sip here. And another thing that I do is I will finish the wings oftentimes with a sweet element. Because I like that combination of a little bit spicy, a little bit smoky, a little bit sweet. Then you have three things working on your palate. What's sweet? Drop of honey is good. Pomegranate molasses is good. Maple syrup could work. Anything. So now you got yourself a nice party going, which is to say that you can do pigs in blankets. You can do some wings. I'm looking forward to the Super Bowl. And if I were making Cubans, man, I would make the Cuban sandwich. Full on. Roast pork. You don't even have to make that yourself. Just figure out where to get that. Ham and cheese, mustard, pickles, toasty, pressed bread, man. Cut that into bite size. That's all I want at my Super Bowl party right now. I want a Cuban sandwich, a couple of wings, maybe some pigs in blankets. My life is complete. With a pitcher of mojitos. I don't care who wins the game at that point. Costa Rica. Fabulous country, beautiful. Central America, surprisingly not terribly far away. I would say 2.5 hours maybe out of Miami, maybe 3.5 out of New York, depending. I don't know. It's not a terribly long trip. And it's mostly 85 degrees there all year long. There are two seasons. They're both hot. Just one has a lot more rain. Why Costa Rica? A whole lot of different kind of climates. Like geologically, there's just all these different kind of sub climates. I mean, jungly and deserty and hot and beautiful. I mean, that's the thing. So I went to I've been there before. San Jose is the capital city. You're not really going to the capital city because the reason you're going to go to Costa Rica is because it's beautiful around the coasts, whether you go up to the volcano or whether you go to where I ended up, which was in the peninsula of Papagayo. Now, look, if you're interested in Costa Rica, get in touch with me. I'll be glad to tell you more. What I can tell you is that there's beauty around all around the country. You're on the Pacific Ocean. The water temperature is warm as well, so you can spend plenty of time in the ocean. You can hike. You can see. You can be near a volcano, or you can go where I was in the peninsula, just super highly developed. But I mean, some stunning landscape and high end though. I mean, this is the Four Seasons is one of those anchor hotels that you find there. The Andaz, which is another one of those kind of fancy hotels. If people who travel a lot have any objection to Papagayo, they'll say, well, it's far from everywhere else that you may want to go. I have a different take on that, which is that you don't, this is the type of vacation that I kept busy. Right, so I didn't need to necessarily see, a volcano. I kept busy because there were enough things for us to do, like zip lining, as an example. Like, you want to go zip lining, you can do that, and that's exciting. If you want to go ATV, all-terrain vehicle, you can do that, and I did. I love doing that. I don't know. There's something that's super fun about getting on one of those vehicles and driving around the terrain, and it's just exciting and great and fun. You want to get yourself out on the water. I suppose you can do that on like a sunset sail type of situation. You can go out during the day if you want on a jet ski. You can take a boat. You can go fishing. You can explore and go snorkeling, and then. I did some hiking. I did some biking. I went to. I'm not spending the time playing golf, but I hit some balls at the range. I mean, what I'm saying is that I don't have a problem over the course of a week finding things to do in a very, very strikingly beautiful place, and then flying back through the Miami airport, ensuring that I get my hands on a freaking, God bless, beautiful Cuban sandwich. Now, we I will tell you this now, which is, let's talk a little bit, because I had said something about recipes. And again, especially like midwinter, cooking is good, but like, you're looking for things that are like, you're looking for things that are hearty and things that are hot and things that are like stews and soups. I made something yesterday. Bear with me on this because I don't know if I can explain to you how to make it, but I'm going to give you a concept, and then if you want to make it, we can kind of figure it out together. And I say that because, I check out the New York Times because on Wednesdays they do recipes, but not every recipe do they give you. Some of them they redirect you to their kind of food section, and you have to subscribe to that. And if you don't subscribe to that, you can't actually have the recipe that they're talking about in their Wednesday, email to readers. Yesterday, I see a recipe in the New York Times called miso chicken in ginger leek and scallion broth. Now, it's cold, as I mentioned to you, and the idea of miso chicken in ginger leek and scallion broth is super appealing to me, especially because I know that in my own house, I happen to have a bunch of the ingredients. I have plenty of chicken on hand. And I did need, and some of the small things here, like I have garlic, I had some onion. I knew that I had chicken broth. I'm not saying, and I noticed on they don't even give you the recipe, but I did a quick search, and what I was able to find, this is very funny, that I was able to find the ingredients listed, literally the source for the ingredients here is Cooking New York Times, but what they don't give you on this site is they don't actually tell you how to do it. So now I'm sitting with a list of more ingredients than I generally like to use. My limit is 5 or 6, but there's definitely more than that on this thing. And now I'm trying to think to myself, what am I going to do? I know the ingredients, and now I have to use my brains and my training to figure out how to make this thing. And so I take chicken thighs, hit them up with salt and pepper, and a little of what they call goshu garu, which is Korean red pepper flakes. People who know and have listened to me, I'm huge on Korean food, but I particularly am excited about Korean herbs and spices, the primary of which is your gochujang, which is kind of your paste, a red pepper paste. Fantastic. And then your goshugaru is the actual red pepper flakes, and I just love them. So I hit up the chicken thighs yesterday. We're in the menu section, the recipe section of today's show. I'll tell you about some stuff that I'm telling you about this dish here because when I figured out how to make it, it was way, way, way better than I was ever anticipating because I hadn't made it before. So now I'm taking a little bit of a run at it. Salt and pepper and goshugaru, those Korean red pepper flakes, on my chicken, which I sear a little bit in a little bit of oil. And why do I do that? Because searing is good, and because it creates a little bit of something at the bottom of the pan, which is a flavor bomb. Which when you add some liquid to it, you've created more flavor than just throwing the chicken into boiling water. I take some garlic and I take some ginger. And that goes in there as well with the chicken while it's cooking. And once the chicken has a little bit of a sear, and I can see I have some of that stuff that I like in the bottom of the pan, a little bit of brown there, right? Not too much, you don't want to burn it, but a little bit of that coloration in the bottom of the pan that you get from the caramelization of the chicken, the garlic, and the ginger. I go, okay, now it's time. Now it's time to do some other stuff. So I take out the chicken, and it's nowhere near cooked. And into the bottom of that pan now goes, you ready? Some garlic and some ginger and some onion. And now I'm going to put in some liquid. Now you could use water or you can use chicken broth. I use the combination of them both. The recipe calls for a little bit of mirin, which is like a sweet Asian, I want to say wine. Mirin, but it's sweet. That's what it is. So that goes in. And now the recipe is asking for miso, red miso. Again, a paste that I went out and picked up over at the Whole Paycheck store, Whole Foods. And the red miso is also, fermented soy. Lovely flavor goes in there, and a little bit of rice wine vinegar, and then maybe some leeks go in there. And so now there's just this whole thing is just this giant pot of flavor. And when you put in the miso, you can see that it instantly changes the color. The red miso instantly changes the color of the broth, because now the broth gets all like beautiful looking and fragrant. And since I had some gochujang in the house, again, and that's also a paste, and it's also red, and it's also soy-based and has some other stuff in it, I put that in as well. And then once that's all kind of like simmering nice, I put all my chicken back in. I cut up the chicken, and I put it all back in there to cook together. And then as the thing is cooking, I realized that I had picked up some snow peas. Those go in there as well. And I picked up some mushrooms and put those in there as well. Wow, that's a lot of flavor in there, man. A lot of flavor in there. And then at the very end, when that thing is done cooking, I don't know, 30, 40 minutes, whatever it is, you can see it, you can taste it, you taste it for the seasoning, it's so good, and then it gets finished with some scallions that you've chopped up, some thinly sliced scallions, both the white part and the green part. And that is some, oh man, I'll tell you something, that's one of those where I was proud of myself, because I thought, you know what, that is not so easy, because I didn't know what I was doing, but apparently I did. That is a recipe that I'll be making again. Another recipe, my friends, is called hammered mushrooms. I don't mean hammered in the sense like, you had one too many bourbons. But what are hammered mushrooms? You cook them, you roast them in the oven, and all the liquid comes out of them, and they get pretty dry, but they're flavored in such a way that they, I don't know, flavor is probably the hardest thing in the world to describe, isn't it? They're like earthy. Well, let me tell you what you do here. You take a couple of pounds of button mushrooms, right? You don't even need fancy mushrooms for this. Button mushrooms are like regular old, mushrooms. So you take a couple of pounds of mushrooms, and people, in case you are wondering, they can be rinsed underwater and dried. You don't have to worry about them soaking things up. Those are not the kind of mushrooms that you have to worry about putting underwater and then they're going to get all kind of like sponged out. No. These mushrooms you can rinse, you can dry, and then you're going to need 2 tablespoons of olive oil, and you're going to need a tablespoon and a half of maple syrup. That's going to be a sweet element. And you're going to need a tablespoon of exactly what I used before for this other thing, those Korean chili flakes, and salt and pepper, right? So that's all. I love this because now we're talking about, if you don't count the salt and pepper, you got 4 ingredients. Mushrooms, olive oil, tablespoon and a half of maple syrup, a tablespoon of Korean chili flakes, salt and pepper, and everything gets blended together, and then you put your oven on 375, you take a couple of baking sheets, you put some parchment paper down, just to make it easier to clean later, and you take these mushrooms, you mix them up with all the other ingredients, and you lay them down flat, one at a time, sliced thin, on your 2 baking sheets, and in the oven at 375, and you let them sit there for a while, and you let them sit there for 15, 20 minutes, and you look at them, and you go, maybe I should turn them over now, because they look like maybe on one side, they look like they look pretty good. And you turn them on the other side, and you do another 10 minutes. And you let them get kind of, I don't want to say dried out, but certainly you can see that much of the moisture has left them. You still leave a little chew. And you get that combination that's coming in from those chili flakes and that maple syrup. So it's that combination of a little bit of sweet, a little bit of spicy, and a little bit of salty. And mushrooms are one of the things that has naturally what they call umami. You've heard about umami. In case you haven't, it is the 5th taste. It is the 5th flavor that you can distinguish on your tongue, and it comes from foods that are savory. A piece of roasted steak is going to have umami, and so will roasted mushrooms. Just delicious and easy to make, and they're called hammered mushrooms. And I probably got that one also from the New York Times, but that one they actually let me keep. I mean, they let me see the recipe, so I made it like that. And that is some yumminess. Then we'll once again we'll credit the New York Times, because today Wednesday, right? That's why I like podcasting on Wednesday night, because I can check out what the New York Times is telling me on Wednesday afternoon. And today, you'll excuse me, but all that yakking will make you dry. Smart water was on sale this week at Costco. So I noticed something in today's recipes offered up by New York Times Cooking. You ready for it? It's called sheet pan sausages with and Brussels sprouts with honey mustard. And everything about that appeals to me. The sausages, the Brussels sprouts, the honey mustard, and even the sheet pan. Why the sheet pan? Because basically what they're telling you is you can throw everything onto one tray, stick it in the oven, and that's all you're going to have to mess up. I'm a huge fan of sausages. I don't know people who aren't. Brussels sprouts are great when they are roasted. And this just sounds so great, doesn't it? So listen to this recipe. She says 4 servings and it'll take you 30 minutes, right? This hearty pan of sticky, honey mustard glazed sausages, Brussels sprouts, and potatoes. Jesus, I didn't see that in the title, but how much better is that now? Only adds to the argument that sheet pan dinners make the best weeknight meals. As the sausages roast, they yield a delicious fat that coats and seasons the caramelized vegetables. Oh my God, does that sound good? Use any fresh sausage you like as long as it pairs well with honey mustard. Feel free to substitute or add other vegetables like squash, cherry tomatoes, broccoli, carrots, or cabbage. The mustard seeds and nuts provide texture and crunch, but leave them out if you prefer. Okay, so a couple of notes here as we go through the ingredients and the preparation. One of the things that Jamie Oliver did today and in his cookbook is roast a ton of vegetables. And the trick with that, of course, is how do you make them more yummy even than they are on their own? Well, step 1 is that you roast them, and step 2 is that you can add other flavors to them. So you take, this just looks perfect, right? So a pound of fresh sausage, sweet, she's saying, or hot, or bratwurst, whatever your favorite thing is. A pound of Brussels sprouts. You're going to trim them and you're going to half them lengthwise. Easy peasy. A pound of small potatoes, like your baby Yukon Gold or Red, in half. Don't you love that? A pound, a pound, a pound. Did you know, by the way, that that's why they call pound cake? Because I think it's like a pound of butter and a pound of flour and a pound of whatever it is. Anyway, a pound of sausage, a pound of Brussels sprouts, a pound of potatoes, 2 tablespoons extra virgin olive oil, more as needed, kosher salt, and freshly ground pepper. And here's your dressing. And again, you're going to need 4 teaspoons of honey and 1 tablespoon of Dijon mustard. I mean, how easy is that? She has yellow mustard seeds and a 1/4 cup of almonds or walnuts chopped, both optional. I like the idea always of adding crunch into the thing. So if you want to do that, you can. And remember that in the recipe, I say her because it's Ali, but it could easily be him. The mustard seeds and nuts. Feel free to put in vegetables like squash, cherry tomatoes, broccoli, carrots, or cabbage. The one hint I will give you is whatever it is that you're roasting, try to keep everything the same size so that it cooks at more or less the same temperature. Put your oven on 450 degrees. Put a sheet pan in the oven. Score the sausages in a few places on both sides, making sure not to cut all the way through. And you do that so that they're not bursting in your oven. So put poke a couple of holes in them, or score them, as they say officially. Transfer to a large bowl with your Brussels sprouts, with your potatoes, and 2 tablespoons of olive oil, and stir until everything is coated. And it goes on, if the mixture seems dry, just add a little more oil. Season the whole thing with salt and pepper. Step 2, spread the mixture in an even layer on the heated baking sheet, and arrange the vegetables cut side down. Roast for 15 minutes until the Brussels sprouts and potatoes start to soften. The sausages will not be cooked through yet. Step 3. Meanwhile, in a small bowl, stir together the honey and the mustard seeds if you're using them. And if you don't. Finally, step 4. Drizzle the honey mustard over the sausages and vegetables and toss or shake to coat. Flip the sausages over. Sprinkle almonds if you're using them. Roast until the sausages are cooked through and the vegetables are golden and tender. Another 10 minutes or so. Season to taste with salt and pepper. I could go for that. I mean, that's everything good. You know, that and a little salad. Nice glass of red wine or a cold beer. What do they say? So a lot of people comment on these things. Easy and satisfying. Weeknight, add carrots for color. I suggest doubling the honey mustard. Ooh, well, there you go. Use cubed sweet potatoes if you have them on hand. More mustard, I agree, and less honey. Sarah says, this was bloody lovely. I added 6 ounces of broccoli slaw mix with carrot and red cabbage. Anyway, there's that, and good. I made some tweaks, and that's what people do. You know, that is kind of the point here of this whole story. Everything is, to me, as a guy who's written a cookbook, everything to me is predicated on understanding a concept, and then, they call it, what is the language they like to use here? Tweaks. They call it tweaks. Other people said, I think the idea is, and it's the first thing we learned in cooking school, is you look at a recipe to understand the totality of the recipe. What it's going to take, what you need, what has to be prepared, what goes together, blah-blah-blue. But part of looking at a recipe is thinking to yourself, boy, wouldn't it be good if? And I think that, this idea of tweaking, I call it improv. I call it intuitive cooking. So when I wrote the cookbook, Short Order Dead, one of the things that I did in there was I put in what I called kind of like your intuitive, I put in the intuitive recipes. Meaning that, you could make, like, if you understood the concept, you could make substitutions. And so this is perfect for that. I mean, sausage is great. You can use whatever kind of fresh sausages, as she says. Potatoes are great, whether they're white or whether they're sweet. Brussels are good. You can also use other veg. And that's just a lovely meal situation. So it's all about adapting things. I like that. Okay, now, that is pretty much what it was that I wanted to cover. You had your Jamie Oliver. He's got a new book out. So if you're interested in veg, there's that. On the other hand, if you're interested just in the idea of like 100 recipes that don't use a ton of ingredients, but they're all about most taste, fewest ingredients, least effort, well, then you have your Short Order Dead. You can pick that one up. I can tell you about that one because, that's mine. Costa Rica, fantabulous. Especially, I suppose, this time of year. There's only a couple of months that you don't want to be down there. I'm going to say you have to check the weather. Rainy season can be brutal. And when I say brutal, it's not even that brutal. They tell me about rainy season down there, which may be like April, May, if I recall it correctly, that even though it rains, the truth of the matter is it like blasts some rain out and then it's done. Like it's like a short rain. It's not like it's raining all day and night. Cuban food in Miami, the Cuban sandwich, one of the top 10, and certainly the Miami airport. Thank you for that. Super Bowl recipes, I've given you the wings. We have talked about pigs in blankets. We went and did a Cuban sandwich. Sheet pan, the miso chicken in ginger, and those hammered mushrooms. Lovely. All good. Gail Simmons on the Dr. Oz show. Just a reminder that you can catch All You Can Eat past episodes either on iHeartRadio or on Spotify. And in the short remaining time, I will Costco ho you because the last time that I went, I picked up some salmon. I'm going to make that right now with a combination of soy, sesame oil, miso, that sweet thing I told you about. So you get sweet, you get salty, you get the sesame, which is the nutty. I'm going to have some ginger and garlic involved in that, and hopefully I'll have some of the scallions left over. I don't even know. But I've also purchased at Costco, and I'm going to let you know this. I'm going to tell you they have tuna. Like tuna raw, fresh, sushi grade. Damn, I love that. It's really good. It's really good. And even though it's kind of like relatively expensive at Costco, I mean, as things go at Costco, it's about 1/10 of what it's going to cost you when you go out to the sushi restaurant and they serve it to you with sashimi. Damn, it's good. Costco. That reminds me, by the way, that like on fish, it's the one place where you don't really want to go farm to table. I am not a fan of the farm raised. The only exception that I have made on stuff coming from the sea is on the mussels or the clams. I mean, again, whenever I have the choice, I want the stuff that's coming fresh out of the water, not from a farm in general. But yeah, I might have made the exception on farmed kind of mussels or clams. I forget. Ladies and gentlemen, that is it for me tonight. This is a 30-second warning to my friend Jimmy there in the studio, because I'm working remotely. Coming to you from New York City, New York, my friends, on Wednesday nights at 8 p.m. Eastern, we do the show called All You Can Eat, about deliciousness. Sometimes travel, sometimes recipes, sometimes dining out. And I'm back on Wednesday nights at 8 p.m. Next week will be episode number 72. I believe I'm going to have a guest for you next week to talk about some of the places that we have gone in the world and some of the things that we have eaten. Until then, I hope that you are off to a brilliant start for the new decade of 2020. I will remind you, as I always do, my friends, that life is short, so never waste a meal.
Channel switched.
I'm the Teflon Pan Man. I'm the Teflon Pan Man. Ain't nothing gonna stick on